Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the DFO DFS Report. Happy Monday, December the 16th. Zach is live in the Nation Network studio. There was a little bit of a scheduling conflict, so we had to push the show back about 15 minutes. But luckily for us, it's only a three-game slate, so not a lot to get through. Plus, the slate does not start until 8 p.m., so an extra hour to build your lineups. Slate doesn't lock for nearly 4 hours from the start of this show, so lots of time to digest everything you get on today's show, everything you got in the DFO DFS charts, and build some winning lineups tonight. Zach, we didn't go live Friday because there was only one game, but a nice slate of games this week after a really shitty week last week in terms of just scheduling. Some really awful slates and some really massive slates. So really, really good 5-game slate of games this week. 5-day slate, excuse me. 3 games tonight, 10 games tomorrow, 5 games Wednesday, 9 games Thursday, and 7 games Friday. Really, really nice. And we don't do shows on the weekend, but even into the weekend, 11 and 6 game slates are pretty good stuff this week. So Zach, welcome into another week of the DFO DFS Report. How's it going, bud?
Thank you. Doing well. Had a good weekend. Running a bit of a hot streak in the DFS world right now. So hoping to carry it over into this week here. Pretty fun slate tonight. Pretty fun slates coming up ahead. I'm really excited to dig into this one though here tonight.
Yeah, really hoping for a nice night tonight because yesterday NFL went horribly from a DFS perspective, from a season-long fantasy perspective, from a betting perspective. It was just a nightmare day for me yesterday. So hoping for better things tonight. Let's start with the goalies as we always do. Luckily for us, they are all either confirmed or likely. We got Jake Ottinger starting for the Dallas Stars. He'll face his friend, Charlie Lindgren, for the Washington Capitals tonight. Apparently, they're good buddies, according to some reports out there today. Stuart Skinner starts for the Edmonton Oilers, who's just been red hot as of late. Speaking of red hot, that is not what the Florida Panthers are. They have been shut out in back-to-back games. They've only scored 5 goals in their last 4 games. Sergei Bobrovsky gets the call for the Panthers. And then in the nightcap, we've got Thatcher Demko for the Vancouver Canucks as they host the Colorado Avalanche, who will counter with Mackenzie Blackwood. Here's your 6 starting goalies for tonight. Let's get into tonight's games. We'll start at the top with the Capitals and the Dallas Stars. The Stars are minus 153 home favorites. 3.3 implied totals for the Stars, 2.7 for the Washington Capitals. In terms of the matchups for this one, pretty good for the top line of the Dallas Stars. Not too bad for the second line of the Stars either. On the other side of the coin, pretty mediocre matchups across the board here for the Washington Capitals. I think the theme on today's show, Zach, is going to be that yes, these look like better matchups than the other teams, but realistically, all 6 teams on tonight's slate are pretty damn good defensively at 5v5. And it, I think, has the chance to be a fairly low scoring night. That being said, all 6 teams do possess fairly high-powered offenses outside of maybe the Vancouver Canucks have been a bit sluggish this year. But so it's going to be an interesting night because it's a lot of really, really good defensive teams going head-to-head. And, you might not need to have a super, super potent night to take down a contest tonight. So we'll start with the Dallas side of things because Dallas 1 is projecting for the highest ownership on the slate. Again, shout out to our friends at Roto Grinders for the projected ownership tonight. Dallas 1 with the highest projected ownership of the night at 22.9% as a whole. Dallas 2 coming in as the 5th highest owned line on the slate. Washington, really the team that is getting overlooked tonight for the most part. Them in Florida. So we'll start on the Dallas side of things because that's the chalky side of things. Dallas 1, obviously, really, really good 5v5 matchup. Dallas 2, not so bad either. Dallas 1, we've talked with them a lot. They've been coming along better as of late. They've been finally putting the puck in the back of the net, thank God. But still, the underlying metrics are just kind of so-so. They're not outstanding. Are you going right back to them tonight as the chalkiest line? Or are you maybe going to pivot a little bit to this Dallas 2 line, which might not have as good of a matchup, but the underlying metrics are just terrific for them. And then they don't have nearly as much ownership. Dallas 2 looks like they're in a really interesting spot for me tonight.
Yeah, they really do look like they're in a great spot. Strong line stats, strong matchup score here tonight. You're getting off some of the chalk of Dallas 1. And I mean, these guys have continued to chug along, even with Tyler Seguin out of the lineup. Logan Stankoven is providing a great floor right now for this line as well, taking 11 shots on goal per hour of ice time. I think he's a great play here tonight on this slate. I do like Dallas 2. I also really like the look at Dallas 1 here tonight. They come in with a really great matchup score here. Their underlying numbers are a little bit concerning. It doesn't really feel like they're, or they're generating as much as they have in years past. But as you mentioned, Brock, the nice thing is that they are finally starting to convert on some of these chances. 2.9 goals for per hour of ice time is a really nice number right there. I think when we look at this slate as a whole, you kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to a lot of these matchup scores on this slate here tonight. I think, for me, I'm building a 20 max tonight, so I'm going to have exposure to players from every top six here in this 3-game slate, because you kind of have to a little bit. So I think it's important to kind of note that I'm going to have a lot of interest in a lot of these lines, just purely from a building standpoint. I do love the look of Dallas 1, but I do think that, if you're building a single entry lineup, I don't mind going to something like Dallas 2 here, pivoting off some of that chalk. They're in an equally strong spot, and their underlying numbers are just a little bit stronger here, right? You take a look at the expected goal numbers, 3.3 expected goals for per hour of ice time versus 1.4 goals. They are generating a lot of looks with Stankoven here. They haven't quite started converting on them yet, and it feels like a nice spot for them to start doing so here this evening.
Yeah, and obviously, from a just purely 5v5 perspective, Dallas 2 looks like they're in a pretty good spot, just given how good their underlying numbers are. But Dallas 1, definitely feels like the better play, even though they're the higher own line. Their matchup is going to be a lot of this top line. Nearly 50% of their ice time coming against the top line for the Washington Capitals, which really has awful defensive metrics. So that looks like a matchup that Dallas 1 can take advantage of. And then they also fully correlate on the top power play unit as well. And that power play unit does have a fairly difficult matchup tonight, going up against the 7th ranked penalty kill, but the Stars power play has been quite solid, number 7 in the league over their last 10 games. So they're projected for the most power plays on the slate tonight. They have the second best power play advantage. So that's really what kind of puts Dallas 1 ahead of Dallas 2. Overall, Dallas 1 grades out as the 4th best line to target on the slate. Dallas 2, the 6th best line to target on the slate. Price-wise, they're fairly similar as well. So overall, the upside does feel greater on Dallas 1, just giving the additional power play exposure and the additional power play correlation. But Dallas 2 is definitely in a nice pivot spot here, coming in about 10% lower owned than Dallas 2. And as Jim B, right on cue, I was about to mention to myself, hopefully Dallas 1 actually delivers. They keep letting me down. That's the thing, right? Like, they have had some real bad performances. They have been better lately, but like they have had some letdown spots this year, and spots where you think they would crush, like that other night when they were against the worst blue line in the league and what Nashville was putting out there, and they did nothing. So yeah, like they are to me a little bit of a curious, like, highest owned chalk spot, because like it does feel like an okay spot to fade as well, just given the fact that they haven't always delivered. And this isn't the easiest matchup ever, but according to the charts, definitely the best matchup on the Dallas side of things. Dallas 2, I really do think is a nice pivot option as well. Any interest in the bottom 6 here for the Stars? 3-game slate, you got to try to get a little bit different. The underlying metrics, though, for both of those lines, pretty bleak. I mean, Dallas 3, I guess, is okay, but they just don't have a lot of game breakers on that line, right? Jamie Benn kind of on an island on his own with Sam Steele and Dadonov. They are still seeing 10% ownership, though. If you want to get super cheap, they're not the worst option, I don't think, tonight. How about you, Zach?
Yeah, I agree. I don't mind getting down there a little bit. Some Jamie Benn mini stacks with either Steele and Dadonov. You can correlate with Miro Heiskanen in there too. Get a little power play 1 correlation between Benn and Heiskanen. I don't mind that play at all. I don't entirely love it, but I think I'll be getting there a little bit here on this slate. I think something worth mentioning too, when you talk about the power play units for the Dallas Stars here, you got some really easy correlation spots here. Play Dallas 1 with Miro Heiskanen, you get exposure to the top power play unit for the Dallas Stars. Play Dallas 2 with Thomas Harley, you get exposure to that second unit, which still sees about 40% of the power play ice time. So, they're live for a man advantage goal here as well in this slate tonight. I think those are some really interesting ways to kind of build around this Dallas Stars side here in this game. But like I said, I'm definitely going to have some exposure to both of these lines. Mix in a little bit of Dallas 3 here to get a little bit different there as well. Both Heiskanen and Harley seeing a fair amount of ownership. Heiskanen coming around 12.5%. Thomas Harley around 10% as well.
Just worth mentioning for our viewers out there that Thomas Harley is ill. He is a game time decision tonight, so keep an eye on that. Obviously, that could change things. I would imagine that if he is out, it will be Niels Lundqvist, maybe Esa Lindell on that second power play unit in his spot. But they didn't seem overly concerned, just dealing with an illness, that he'll be back or that he will play tonight. I think the one thing that's interesting about Dallas 3 is that, you've got these ridiculously high-priced lines in pretty good spots tonight, being Edmonton and and Colorado. And there's not a lot of really great cheap options on a 3-game slate like this. And Dallas 3 is kind of an okay one. I mean, if you take a look at the raw projections, which don't factor in the charts at all, they grade it out as the third best points per thousand line on the slate at just $8,800. So they're like a line that obviously feels like they fit pretty well with these really expensive lines that definitely have a little bit of upside, and that's why they're seeing a decent chunk of ownership. You've definitely played more Washington than I have recently. I've kind of been off the Washington train since the Ovechkin injury. I kind of rode it into the ground when they were red hot, and then I think I got off at a decent time. They've still been pretty productive, but it's definitely cooled off a little bit. But I mean, you've got Protoss right now. Of the players, I think there's like 490 players that have played over 455 minutes so far this season. He's second in the NHL in points per 60 behind only Brandon Hagel. So he continues to be very, very productive. This team just really not seeing a whole lot of ownership at all tonight. The top line, the second line, both around average matchups for this evening. The top line has the slightly better offensive numbers. They just haven't converted on as many chances, but the underlying metrics are better for them. The matchup's probably a little bit better for them as well. It does look like against this Dallas 1 top line, it does look like a matchup that could be relatively high event, and these two lines, potentially trading chances. And then when you just look at Washington 1 as a whole with McMichael, Strome together, it feels a little bit of a better mini stack. You can include Radish if you want, but McMichael, Strome definitely feels like a better mini stack than maybe a Dubois, Protoss or Protoss Wilson, or you can full stack obviously as well. But to me, I just feel like you get a little bit more upside with that top line. That being said, the value is massive on that second line as well. At basically no ownership, we're talking about trying to find lines to pair with a Colorado or to pair with an Edmonton tonight. Washington 2 might fit that bill. Protoss continues to get it done at just 5% at $3,600. Dubois has been pretty hot as of late as well, really starting to come on, finally scoring some goals, just 9% owned and only 4K. Some nice value there as well. So I think that, this is a nice contrarian spot. The Stars certainly haven't been amazing. Coming into the season as basically Stanley Cup favorites or among the Stanley Cup favorites, and just haven't really lived up to that just yet. So I don't mind Washington in this spot as a get different spot, and they're really not all that expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think it's a solid enough spot here. You take a look at Washington 1. They grade out as the 7th best line to target on the slate, but their ownership, they're only projecting for like 7.6% ownership right now on the slate. I feel like it's an easy spot to get over the field here tonight. When you look at this Washington 1 line, I really don't mind getting to them and getting a bit over the field on them. I do agree. I think McMichael and Strome is the way to go here if you're targeting this Washington side. It is good to see Dubois starting to convert on some of these chances. The issue for me with this second line, though, Brock, they just don't really have a floor. I mean, Alexei Protoss, for as much as he's producing offense, he's not really generating a lot of shots or anything like that. Pierre-Luc Dubois still only taking 5.5 shots on goal per hour of ice time. That's kind of my concern, I think, when it comes to this second line of the Capitals. If I was targeting one line, it would probably be that top line. I think you just have more offensive upside with Connor McMichael, who's still scoring at a great pace. Dylan Strome has just been an absolute assist machine this year. The guy's churning out apples like nobody's business. So I think I do lean a little bit more towards this Washington 1 side. I also think it's worth noting that Jake Andre, I think, is a great play in net tonight. One of the best goaltenders in the league so far this season, but man, he's just destroyed the Capitals in his career. 5 games played, 4 wins, 1 shutout, 1.6 goals against average, and a .950 save percentage. So Andre is one of my favorite goaltending plays on the slate here. So I think it's understandable why there's such little ownership here on the Capitals, partially due to that. But I also think that, especially if you're 20 maxing, like, it's pretty easy to get over, 7% here on this Washington 1 line. So I've got some interest in both of these top 2 lines. Probably be a little heavier on Washington 1 than Washington 2. Washington 3, I don't think I'm going to be getting down there. Although, again, if you're looking for some salary relief, like, it is a decent enough option. Their offensive numbers haven't been too terrible. They're generating a lot of shot attempts. The problem is they're just not really getting much quality looks and not really converting on them either. So a bit of a buyer beware there if you're looking to really dumpster dive on that third line for the Capitals. But I think if you're going for a third line, I'd prefer the Dallas Stars third line over the Capitals in this matchup.
Yeah, I would agree there. I agree completely about Washington too, right? They're just kind of like a dart throw at this point. You need them to score because they don't do anything at all. It's like, Protoss is like the opposite of Joel Farabee, where Farabee's all floor but never actually puts points out. Protoss just puts up points, but at like a, definitely it's crazy because like I just keep saying like the regression's got to set in for this guy eventually, and it just hasn't. He just continues to kind of roll along kind of inexplicably, despite, some just massive red flags across the board. I agree too that like Washington won, like the fact that they ranked 7th best and then ownership wise, it's 15th highest on the slate. Like, so there's a massive discrepancy, probably the largest on the slate there. So, and then you factor in the power play. They have the number 1 power play advantage on the slate tonight. That top power play unit sees about 70% of the ice time. The power play has been solid even without Ovechkin. This is just last 10 games. And, he's been out for a while, going up against the 17th ranked PK, which is the second worst PK on the slate tonight. I like Washington 1 tonight in this spot. You've got that top power play unit featuring Strome and McMichael, so that's just another reason to like that mini stack, and then you can correlate them with Carlson or Chychrun or both if you want to get weird. You can include Wilson in that stack as well to try to get exposure to both lines and just go full power play stack. So yeah, there's a lot of options here with this Washington side of things, but I agree. Somebody in the chat pointed it out, and it's kind of the exact feelings as I have is I don't think I'm going to full stack either one of these lines tonight, but I do like kind of grabbing pieces of this Washington Capitals side. But like, as a full stack, sure, they're coming at 7%, but that's basically just their ownership across the board, right? 7.4%, 7.7% for McMichael and Strome. Not a whole lot there. Before we get to the second game, just listen to our guy, Adam K. says, smash that like button for Brock and Zach Rock. And also, best DFS hockey show on the internet. Thanks so much for the kind words, Adam. Really appreciate that. Let's move on to game number 2. We've got the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. Now, obviously, you got to Stanley Cup rematch here. This one is like two teams that are just headed in the opposite directions right now, at least recently, right? The Oilers have been on an absolute tear. They've been red hot. It's a lot more reminiscent of what we saw from them last year, a lot more of what we've expected to see at the start of this year. Bit of a slow start. You've pointed out that maybe they're a team that gets off to slow starts, and then they just take some time to heat up, and now here they are. The Panthers on the other side of things, as I mentioned earlier, been shut out in back-to-back games. 5 goals, I think, in the last 4 games. It's just been really, really ugly. Alexander Barkov missed their last game due to illness. The Panthers, he didn't skate this morning, but the Panthers still said they are hopeful that Barkov will play. Just some numbers here. I dropped them in our DFS Discord before the show, just to give you an idea of how impactful Alexander Barkov is. Without Barkov on the ice, they score 1.3 goals 4 per 60 less at 5v5 and give up 0.8 goals for goals against more without Barkov on the ice. If you want to look at expected goals, a full goal fewer in expected goals without Barkov and half a goal more in expected goals against. So just like a guy that's literally worth a goal per 60 at both ends of the ice basically is just insane. Now, before we dive in, we don't know for sure what these Panthers lines are going to look like without or if Barkov plays. This is what they were kind of rolling with before he got sick. This is what we were expecting them to roll with against Vancouver on Saturday before he was ill. So I just went back to those lines, and hopefully this is what they end up rolling with tonight. If it is, for the sake of the charts, hopefully it is, because boy, it looks pretty good for Connor McDavid. He's going to see about 28% of his ice time against Florida 2, and Florida 2 with Boquist, Bennett, and Tkachuk. These defensive metrics are horrendous. So lately, it's going to be interesting. Like in the playoffs last year when they played the Panthers, we didn't see a lot of McDavid against Barkov. In the playoffs last year, they really liked going with Janmark, Brown, and Henrique together, and they kind of matched up with Barkov's line a little bit more. Now with Jeff Skinner on that line, they haven't really been using that line that same way. So we're most likely going to see either Draisaitl or McDavid matching up with Barkov, which is going to leave one of those lines with the Tkachuk line, which is by far the better matchup. You're a resident Edmonton Oilers fan here. It's hard to get a read on the Oilers because some games it seems like they're matching up the Draisaitl line. Some games it seems like they're matching up the McDavid line, depending on the opponent. What do you think is going to happen tonight?
Yeah, it's a great question. It doesn't really feel like the Oilers have been super matchup heavy lately. They kind of just tend to roll their lines. I mean, I think this is a really nice spot, like you mentioned, for the top line here. Those numbers, those defensive metrics for Florida 2 are outright terrible. And the Oilers are really firing on all cylinders right now. Leon Draisaitl just got named first star of the week for his performances last week, 3 goals and 9 points in 3 games. Edmonton had 3 huge performances, beating the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Minnesota Wild, and the Vegas Golden Knights, all pretty handedly. Like the Oilers really, really dominated pretty much all three of those games there. So I mean, I'm always kind of firing up Edmonton at will, and I think it's not going to change here tonight whatsoever. You talk about ways to kind of find cheaper lines here on this slate, and I mean Edmonton too is just such an interesting option here because Leon Draisaitl is quite honestly playing some of the best hockey that we have ever seen him play over his time here in Edmonton. He got the bag with the big contract extension this offseason. Doesn't kick in until next season, but man, he's already working it off. He's been just tremendous this year. 2.1 goals per hour of ice time, 4.3 points per hour of ice time. Still not taking a ton of shots, only 8.3 per hour, but that feels like it's starting to tick up a little bit here. I'm firing up the top six here for the Edmonton Oilers, like I always do. I think this is a really nice spot. Vasily Podkolzin and Kasperi Kapanen have been pretty solid, all things considering, this season for the Oilers. They're both a little bit dependent on getting points, but at $2,500 each, I mean, like you can play them in your lineups, and if they end up with a zero, you're still probably okay. So I'm feeling pretty good about the Edmonton Oilers in this spot here tonight. I think they're going to be highly motivated coming in against this Florida Panthers team. And in the same breath, too, like Florida's really struggled these last couple of games here, and they really did not look good whatsoever with Alexander Barkov out of the lineup. You talked about how valuable he is to that team. I think this is a really interesting spot here, too. I think I'm going to have some exposure to the Panthers. I think it's a little bit concerning when it comes to the status of Barkov, but Panthers TV reporter Katie Engelson quoted Paul Maurice, who said, if Barkov is in the lineup, they're not going to be monitoring his minutes. So it sounds like if he's in, he's a full go tonight. So personally, just hearing that, it makes me think that Barkov is going to be in the lineup here tonight for the Panthers. So I think it's a pretty interesting matchup here as a whole. What's really interesting to me, it felt like the Oilers were going to have a better power play matchup coming into this game here. It feels like they've really turned a corner with their power play, specifically with Leon Draisaitl. I think it's 7 points in his last 8 games on the power play. Their power play is starting to really click here. They see so much of the ice time. The Panthers take a fair amount of penalties, 2.9 times shorthanded per game. I think that's a nice way to build around the Edmonton Oilers here tonight as well.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the reason that the Oilers don't have a better power play matchup is they just don't draw a lot of penalties. I mean, just 2.5 power plays per game, 2.9 times shorthanded per game, pretty low number there for the Panthers side of things. But yeah, I mean, just look at these numbers for the Oilers. Like, remember early in the season when they were like the most undisciplined team in hockey? Now their games just feature no power plays whatsoever, which doesn't help them, right? Their penalty kill has been great. Their power play has been awesome. Like, they need to probably initiate a few more scrums, try to get some guys taken in the box and get on the man advantage a little bit more frequently. But yeah, pretty good matchup here on the power play. Obviously, 23rd ranked PK for the Panthers in their last 10 games. So hopefully the Oilers do see some time on the man advantage tonight. Let's flip our focus over to the Panthers side of things. The matchup's obviously not ideal, but the underlying metrics here for the Panthers top six, I mean, leaves a little bit to be desired, right? Like, obviously, this top line is loaded with talent if Barkov plays with Verhaeghe and Reinhart. But the matchup's not great. They're not scoring right now. Just 1.2 goals for per 60 when that line's together is ridiculous. Don't feel nearly as good about Florida 2 when they don't have Verhaeghe on the line. So, given the recent struggles, I don't know how much Florida I really feel comfortable getting to tonight. The top line is still great, so is the 5th best option on the slate, but Florida 2 all the way down at 11th is pretty gross. Neither line, kind of similar to the Washington side of things, seeing much ownership at all. As an Oilers fan, do you feel like maybe not enough respect given to the Panthers here in this game? Do you think that people are just reacting a little bit too much to what we've seen in the last couple of games from them, and that, this is they're probably going to score tonight? Like, they're not going to get shut out 3 times in a row, I wouldn't imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's good reason to think that, the Panthers are in a spot to bounce back here. The one thing with the Oilers right now is like, they're really comfortable playing these lower event grinding style of games. And if you think back to the Stanley Cup Finals last year, that's what a lot of that 7-game series was. Like, it wasn't like they were massive high scoring games or anything like that. Stuart Skinner's numbers against the Panthers in the regular season have been awesome. He's 2-0, 253 goals against average and a 929 save percentage. He was good in the playoffs last year too. I mean, 2.33 goals against average, 909 save percentage. It was enough. He helped them get to that 7th game there. Barkov and Reinhardt is probably where I'd have most of my interest, and I guess Verhaeghe too. That top line as a whole, it feels like they have more success against the Oilers in these games than the second line does. And I think, the other reason too is you take a look at the line stat numbers here. If you can pull them up, Rock, I mean, Florida 2 is just shooting the lights out right now. 4.5 goals per hour of ice time versus 2.6 expected. They don't generate quite as many high danger chances. They're really not generating a lot of high danger chances at all, actually. That top line, it feels like a good bounce back spot here if Barkov is in the lineup. I can understand why the field might be a little bit tepid on Florida here. I think it makes sense. But in the same breath, like, this is a really talented team. Like, it's not like these guys have just forgotten how to play or forgotten how to score or anything like that. So I think for me, like, I'm probably going to be over the field on the Edmonton Oilers tonight. And I'm honestly probably going to be over the field a bit on the Panthers too, just in an attempt to try and get a little bit different from the field here. I mean, it feels kind of the same with like that Dallas 2 spot, right? Where it's like you look at Dallas 1, they're seeing double the ownership. I think it's a pretty interesting spot here for the Panthers. That's kind of my analytical mind, my like objective thinking about this. The homer in me says don't play any of the Florida Panthers because Stuart Skinner is going to stand on his head again. But I do think it's an interesting game for both of these spots.
I said I wouldn't bring this chart up too frequently, but I'm going to bring it back here. Just worth taking a look at here from the Florida Panthers side of things. The last 10 games, shooting just 6.4% at 5v5. So you would imagine positive regression will set in eventually for them. Whether or not that happens tonight remains to be seen. Zach, you are frozen. I can't hear you. Hopefully your camera bounces back. But as long as I can hear you, it's better than the black bubble that we've seen you in recently. So from the Florida Panthers side of things, the power play, second best up against the 10th ranked PK. Still the third best power play advantage on the slate tonight. I do feel comfortable still getting to this side of things because, even when they were shut out the first time, it was like, okay, yeah. They'll bounce back in the second game. They were still high owned. Now it's gone so far the other way. The ownership is so low on them tonight. I don't mind getting to them. Still got a 3.0 implied total, which is the highest of any of the underdogs on the slate tonight. So, you could imagine just basically looking on the implied totals, why Washington, why Vancouver might be low owned, but still Florida feels like they're in an okay spot. The matchups, kind of be damned. The one thing, Zach, if you're still with me here, that I would be most interested in is if the Florida Panthers end up changing their lines a little bit. I think that opens up new avenues to play them, specifically if Verhaeghe drops back to the second line with Bennett and Tkachuk. And you'd imagine having been shut out in back-to-back games that you would be pretty inclined to shuffle the line, shuffle the deck a little bit. Maybe not with us anymore. I'll keep going until I hear Zach talk, and then we will pick things back up. Let's move on now to the final game of the night. We've got the Vancouver Canucks and the Colorado Avalanche. The Avs are minus 151 road favorites, 3.3 implied total, 2.7 implied total for the Vancouver Canucks. Matchups are really good on both sides of things here. The top line for the Canucks draw the number one matchup on the slate. Second line's in a pretty good spot as well. This Colorado top line, basically top six, really, really poor defensive metrics, which is a little surprising. I mean, they've been better recently defensively. You'd like to see them continue to improve in that area. And I think they have been a little bit better as of late. So given, let's just pull up this chart again. I say I'm not going to bring it up a lot, but these numbers for the Canucks are just downright atrocious. Really, really bad. Here he is. Hey, how's it going?
It's always something with this technology these days, I tell you.
Yeah. Old man yells at cloud situation. Just talking about the Vancouver Canucks here, just as an overall whole, last 10 games, only 1.64 expected goals for per 60. The Avs, as I mentioned, have been a little bit better defensively, just 2.37 goals against per 60, which is a pretty reasonable number. Like, the matchup suggests that this should be a pretty good spot for Vancouver, but their offense has just been so inept. Obviously, a lot of that time was without JT Miller, but I don't think the Avs are quite as bad as maybe these numbers suggest that they are. And I just don't feel that confident in this Vancouver Canucks side of things this evening. That being said, they are, I'll just pull up the lines because it's way easier to see. They are shuffling the deck a little bit, and the look of Connor Garland, JT Miller, Brock Besser together is certainly intriguing. Garland is a guy that doesn't matter what line he plays on, he drives offense, and he's been terrific. So that line going together does give me a little bit of excitement. The matchup obviously going against the McKinnon line tonight is going to be rough, but the number one matchup score on the slate. So like, if it turns into a bit of a track meet, I do think Vancouver 1 looks like they're in an okay spot. I don't really care about playing Vancouver 2 with DeBrusque, Pedersen, and Sasson. Max Sasson, however you pronounce his name. Sasson's actually been pretty solid. Pedersen, DeBrusque have obviously bounced back a little bit, but like, it's just not a line that I have a whole lot of faith in this matchup. So Vancouver 1 looks okay. Decent chunk of ownership, but nothing crazy. The price is still pretty affordable as well at 15,700. So that's the one line that I actually am going to dip my toe in on the Vancouver side. But as a whole, I'm not all that interested outside of Vancouver 1 or Quinn Hughes. How about you, Zach?
Yeah, I do agree with you there. I don't know, man. This Canucks side of things feels a little bit ugly to me as a whole. Thatcher Demko getting the start. This is his third game since coming back from injury. First two, he's really struggled. 830 save percentage, negative 3.7 goals saved above expected. This is an ugly matchup for him against a high-powered offensive team in the Colorado Avalanche. So I think for me, like, I'm pretty comfortable coming under the field here on this Canucks side of things. Obviously, they're not drawing the most ownership right now, 14% for the top line, around 11% for the second line, featuring Max Sasson Faceoff. Little Karate Kid reference there for anybody who likes that movie. But I got a lot of interest in this Colorado side, to be honest. I mean, the top line is the top line. They're coming out as a second line to target on this slate here. And I actually don't mind the look of Colorado too either. I've actually got them in my head-to-head matchup here tonight. They're just absolutely shooting the lights out right now. 3.2 goals per hour of ice time versus 2.2 expected goals. Obviously, that's a number that is likely to regress at some point in time, but it feels like a spot where, that might not be the case here tonight with Demko and net. So I agree on the Canucks side of things. I'm interested in the top line. I don't really have much, if any, interest in that second line. The third line, kind of the same thing, man. Like, it's just they're not really driving offense a whole lot. They're just kind of converting on scoring chances that they're getting here with some strong goal numbers. Mackenzie Blackwood, probable starter here for the Colorado Avalanche. I mean, he has been really solid for San Jose, and it seems to be he is carrying it over to Colorado now.
Yeah, just apologies if you guys can hear my dog crying at all. She just came down here and she's scared of something. So apologies in advance if something scared her and you guys hear it. But yeah, like, outside of this, Vancouver 3 is usually an okay target, like when Garland's there, but without Garland on the line, it doesn't feel quite as good. So yeah, probably Vancouver 1 or bust. Obviously, the Colorado side of things looks really good. Colorado 1 is wrong sheet. Colorado 1's the number 2 line overall tonight behind Edmonton 1. They are very expensive at 23,800, but I think there's enough value on this slate that you can squeeze them in pretty, not easily, but it's not super difficult. There's some solid value on the blue line. There's obviously, we've already talked about a little bit of value up front. You've got top lines like Dallas 1 at just $16,000. So it's not crazy difficult to get these guys in your lineup. As a whole, they're coming in as the third highest owned line in the slate, but McKinnon is coming in as the highest owned forward on the slate at 26.1%. So, Demko obviously been in a bit of a tough spot coming back, and just the rust is showing a little bit. I think the overall thing here for the Canucks too is, like, outside, now with Hronek hurt, outside of Quinn Hughes, I mean, this blue line is pretty suspect for the most part. I was actually looking at their numbers similar to what I did with Barkov earlier, of like what this team looks like when Quinn Hughes is on the ice and what this team looks like when he's off the ice, and the difference is just absolutely drastic. Luckily for him, or luckily for them, I guess, it's a good thing that he plays like 30 minutes a night. But yeah, Colorado too, their underlying metrics are a little bit concerning. Like, they're not outstanding, but they're okay. And I think that, they're going to continue to improve. This is a talented trio that, like, it doesn't really matter how bad the underlying metrics are. I believe in the talent of Ross Colton and Casey Middlestad and Valerie Nichushkin at $4,900. And then now, the other night, we saw Ross Colton and Casey Middlestad move to the top power play unit. Colton is going to remain there tonight, but Middlestad is going to move back down to the second unit, and Nichushkin back up to the first unit. So $4,900, Valerie Nichushkin feels like one of the better value plays on tonight's slate. Really like that price tag for him. So yeah, I'm interested. Anything, any depth pieces from this other lines or from these two teams. Like obviously, no Garland for Vancouver 3 feels a little bit gross. Not a whole lot of offense coming out of Colorado 3. So I'm assuming you're staying away there?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I think there's, a reason to maybe get 5% in as the field's kind of doing for these third lines here if you're looking to get some really cheap options. I don't hate the idea of taking a stab at this Vancouver 3 line, 3.3 goals for per hour of ice time. Problem is they just don't really generate a whole lot of high danger chances. So are they really going to be able to get to the areas that they're going to need to score against Mackenzie Blackwood? I have a hard time thinking so. So I'm pretty comfortable staying away from the depth pieces here in this game tonight.
Yeah, and we'll get to the goalies in more depth in a few minutes, but Mackenzie Blackwood at $7,600 feels like easily one of the best goalie plays on the slate tonight. Just the overall lack of goal scoring that we've seen from this Vancouver Canucks side recently, and that price tag. I mean, Blackwood is a good goalie. We've talked about he's an above average goalie. Now he's on a much better hockey team, so really like him. We've liked him when we threw so many darts with him, and when he was in San Jose, and now it feels so great to just play him with some confidence in Colorado. The power play, the 5th and 6th ranked power plays on the slate tonight. The Avs, obviously have struggled a little bit on the power play, but like that's too talented of a group to continue to struggle. So yeah, okay. Are they the 5th ranked power play on the slate tonight? Sure, you could say they are, but I'm not too concerned, right? Like I'm still comfortable rolling out that top power play unit. Whether obviously now you've got Nichushkin and Colton there as well, that really helps their value on that top or that second line. So if you want to get away a little bit from the chalk here of Colorado 1, the 3rd highest owned line on the slate. Colorado 2 coming in much lower, owned about half, not half, but 11% versus 17% ownership. Any final thoughts on any of these games, Zach? Anything that you think that we missed before we move to the defensemen and the goalies?
Yeah, two quick things. I think it's worth noting too that like Vancouver's really struggled on home ice this season. For whatever reason, they cannot get up in front of their own crowd. So I think that's another reason why I'm leaning a little heavier on the Colorado side of this game. And I forgot to mention it earlier, but Edmonton 3 could be an interesting cheap spot here tonight as well. Adam Henrique and Jeff Skinner both projecting really, really well with some pretty solid floors here tonight too. Jeff Skinner is still shooting the puck a ton, 10.9 shots on goal per hour of ice time. I think you can also mix them in as those kind of cheap depth punt lines if you need to find a little bit of salary relief here on the slate. Henrique and Skinner only projecting for about 6% ownership tonight.
Yeah, Jeff Skinner really popping in the projections, which we will get to now. Jeff Skinner, one of the highest projected value plays on the slate at $2,900, behind only Nathan McKinnon, Henrique popping up there as well. Do not mind getting to them at all. And like you said, at 5% ownership, it's pretty easy to get them in a couple lineups in a 20 max. And if they score a goal or two, they do feel like they're in a pretty reasonable spot tonight. In terms of the matchup for them, not the best, but I'm behind it. The value is certainly there, and definitely guys that we talked about some decent value lines already that maybe don't have great floors. That's at least one that has a floor, so
Yeah.
it's a bonus.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you look at Jeff Skinner too, last 10 games played, he's averaging 8.2 DraftKings points per game. And what's interesting too is scoring 8.6 DraftKings points per game at home versus 5.8 on the road. So this is clearly a guy who likes to play in front of the home crowd so far this season, and he'll have the opportunity to do so again here tonight.
Let's get to the blue liners. We'll sort by value here, which we already are. Thomas Harley looks really, really good at $3,800 if he plays. Tremendous value there. He's been, a little bit quieter this year than what we saw last year. Excuse me, but yeah, really like Thomas Harley there. Estlin Dell, just a guy that just seems to get it done on a night-to-night basis. Like it's weird though. Like it feels like he never hits any bonuses. He always has like 3 shots and 2 blocks, or 2 blocks and 2 shots, and doesn't smash, but he's just always a guy that you can rely on for reasonable production. So he projects well, but I don't play him a ton because he never really has like those massive performances. But $3,200, you could do worse. I'm sure he pops on your charts, but man, Sam Malinsky has been insane. Like his just raw floor is bonkers good for $2,700, and he's projected for just 2% ownership tonight. Easily my favorite value play on the slate.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's in a great spot here tonight, $2,700. Calvin DeHaan, $2,800. I think he's in a really nice spot here as well in this game too. There's some really interesting cheaper options in terms of the punts tonight, but I mean, Jacob Chikrin is probably a guy that is probably going a little bit overlooked, I think, here tonight.
Yep.
he is projecting for 10-11% ownership, which is a pretty fair clip. But man, he has been so productive as of late, and he's up on the top pairing now. He's up on the top power play unit. If you're looking to get different, like I don't know how many people are actually going to play Carlson and Chikrin together in a lineup. You mix in one of the guys from the top power play unit for the Capitals. I think that's a really nice way to kind of get yourself different here on this slate. Shout out to Darnell Nurse here too at $4,500. I think he's also an excellent value play on this slate here tonight.
Highest owned defenseman on the slate too. Crazy. What time to be alive?
You know what, man? Like, I don't know what happened, but like ever since he came back from getting that bump from Ryan Reeves, he has looked absolutely incredible. He's got a tremendous floor, 7.7 shots on goal per hour of ice time, 5.4 block shots. What's really interesting too with Nurse is that they're playing him almost exclusively with the Leon Draisaitl line. So they're generating a lot of offense. So I think there's some correlation there if you're playing Draisaitl or if you're playing Nurse here tonight too.
Yeah, I agree. At $4,500, he looks pretty solid. A couple other defensemen that I don't mind. Aaron Ekblad's $4,200, especially if you're getting any Florida in your lineup. But even as a one-off, I think he looks fine. Jacob Chikrin, I absolutely love. He was in my head-to-head lineup like the entire time I was building, and then it came down to it, and he was the one that kind of got squeezed out. But going to be playing him as much as I possibly can this evening. Let's get to the goalies. As we mentioned, we both really like Mackenzie Blackwood at $7,600. Sergei Bobrovsky is projecting shockingly well. At $7,400, obviously projected to see the highest shot volume on the slate, and the Oilers' implied total isn't all that high, so that's why Bobrovsky projects well. And if there's one thing I'll always tell you is that the sports books know more than I do. So I like to think of myself as on the ball and on top of things, but you just can't outsmart the sports book sometimes. And there's something there with Bobrovsky, and these projections are powered by the sports books for the most part. So yeah, $7,400. He looks like an okay play. Would you rather play Bobrovsky? This is probably not the best question for you, but would you rather play Bobrovsky at $7,400 or Lindgren at $7,200?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I probably would lean towards Bobrovsky because I think that game has the feel of a bit of a more grinding style of game. Like he's projecting to see a ton of volume. Like he's projected to make 31 saves on the night. He's going to be very live for the 35 save bonus here. I also think he's just a better goaltender in general than Charlie Lindgren. But it's worth noting too that Bobrovsky's struggled this year. Like he hasn't quite been the Bobrovsky of old. 20 games played so far this season, .892 save percentage, negative 4.3 goals saved above expected, which is the worst mark on this slate for a goaltender. It does feel like one of these games that Florida might be able to come in and steal, though, if they can get their offense going.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen the Stars lineup kind of disappear at times, right? Like they've been overall on the season, they've been solid, but they've had quiet games. I mean, that game against Nashville is the most fresh in my mind, where it's like they have no business just doing nothing, and they did nothing. So I don't hate Lindgren at $7,200 either. So yeah, highest projected ownership tonight coming in on Mackenzie Blackwood. But honestly, I think I would play every single one of these goalies save for Thatcher Demko tonight. How about you?
Yeah, I honestly agree with you, man. Like, I think when I look at this slate as a whole, like, for as much as I know I'm going to be a homer and come in really heavy on Edmonton, I think I'm going to try and really spread out the ownership here tonight because I think you can make arguments for any of these top six lines for having a good night.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like you can really say that a whole lot. I don't know, man. I think it's going to be a really fascinating slate to see the way it breaks down because all of these games have the feel, like we talked about this at the top of the show too. Like all these games have the feel of either being like a complete barn burner and a shootout or like slow grinding, low scoring style of game. So I think when you're building your lineups tonight, kind of have that in mind with what kind of a build you're going for. Is this going to be a build that's more directed towards a higher flying type of slate or a lower scoring one? And I think try and find some correlation through that for sure is the way to go.
Yeah, to me, I feel like it's probably most of these games are going to be on the lower scoring side of things. That's just kind of my general feel, and I think that's why all these goalies feel okay, is because it's like I don't anticipate these games being super high scoring. I might, but eat my words tomorrow, but they feel like a little bit, some 3-2 hockey games, tonight, outside of maybe that Vancouver game where just Demko just is in a really, really tough spot. Okay, so this is a little hilarious, but We'll get to today's daily face-off head-to-head here in a moment. But before we do, if you want to participate in today's hat trick pick challenge, you can do so by commenting your hat trick pick in the comment section of the video on YouTube, not the live chat. Make sure you do it in the comments section. And if your player scores a hat trick, which we've had lots of hat tricks, but not a lot of correct hat trick picks recently, we'll get you a $25 gift card to nationgear.ca. Pick up some DFO swag. Typically, we know exactly who won the last head-to-head, but we don't actually know who won last Thursday's head-to-head. But if I recall correctly, my lineup was shit. So I'm pretty sure Zach did. So we're giving the win to Zach. We're going to have to go back and figure it out for sure. But let's just pretend Zach won for now by default. And who knows? Maybe it was me. We'll find out shortly. But Zach, you can go first here just until we find out.
Yeah, very happy to pull out a W.
Yeah, whatever.
It's really nice. So for me, obviously wanted to get Edmonton one into the mix here. Shocker there. I was trying to go for like a McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman stack, and then I was down to just McDavid and Draisaitl, and then I ended up down to McDavid and Hyman, which I don't entirely hate at all either. Since Hyman has returned from injury, 5 goals in 5 games played, they're finally starting to go in for him, which is great to see. Dallas won. I think they're in a great spot here tonight, so we got a little bit of them with some Rupe Hintz and Jason Robertson. Mentioned really liking the look of Colorado too here on this slate tonight. Ross Colton, Valeri Nichushkin, got them in as a mini stack as well. Punting off on the defenseman here tonight. Calvin DeHaan has been a guy I played a lot this season. I think he's a fine play at $2,800. Noah Juulsen at $2,500. He's on the top pairing. He's blocked 6.3 shots on goal per hour of ice time so far this season. That's the most of any Canucks defenseman in the lineup tonight. He'll see a little bit of bump, and I'm kind of just hoping that he's going to hit that shot block bonus for me. And then Mackenzie Blackwood, $7,600. I mean, that's a great goaltending play right there.
Yeah, I mean, if you just by looking at your lineup too, you can kind of just get a sense for this slate as a whole, where it's like, to think about building this lineup last year, right? Like, there's just no way you'd be over the salary cap by $20,000 with Hintz, Robertson, being $7,000 players a year ago. Nichushkin was like an $8,000 player at one point. I mean, even earlier this year, Ross Colton was in the mid 6K. And you can pair them all with Connor McDavid doesn't really seem plausible. But yeah, the pricing a little bit soft, and that's why Dallas won looks so good tonight. My build initially, as I mentioned, started kind of around that Washington power play a little bit, trying to at least fade this Dallas one chalk. I am going to get to Dallas one a healthy amount tonight, but I do feel a little bit weird about them being chalky, just given how much they've kind of let everybody down in recent games. I ended up landing on the build of you can actually put Colorado 1 and Edmonton 2 together. Those two teams are the ones that I feel kind of the most confident about tonight is Colorado and Edmonton. Obviously, you can't play the two top lines together. So the fact that you can get Draisaitl's line fully correlating with McKinnon's line, I think is pretty interesting. I talked about getting Sam Malinsky as one of my favorite values. S. Lindell kind of just chips in. 7.9 DraftKings points per game. Not too bad for a $3,200 defenseman. Malinsky's been dynamite lately. And then I had just enough money for Blackwood. So, yeah. I don't necessarily think this is the best cash build by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly not one I would enter in a cash game, but I think it's just fun to, these builds that we're putting together just kind of tries to show off what you can do and try to explore a little bit and showcase what's on this slate tonight. And I think we did a pretty good job tonight of showing two different ways of looking at this slate, because there are some soft pricing and there's also some really, really good cheap value, and you can get kind of creative with things tonight. So hopefully you guys have some success building your lines. Before we go though, let's get to our hat trick pick challenge. Zach, since you won last Thursday's head-to-head, you can go first.
Thank you. Yeah, once again, just really, really excited for that. I'm going to be rolling with the boy Zach Hyman. 5 goals in his last 5 games played since coming back from injury. He has had some success against the Panthers in his career too. Let's see if he can keep that up tonight.
I'm going to be on the side of the Florida Panthers find the offense tonight. I think the Florida Panthers score some goals tonight. I'm going to go with Sam Reinhart hat-trick pick. No offense, Zach. I think that team gets, I don't even know if they win this game, but it would be, maybe it's a 4-3 loss and Reinhart has all 3. So I'm going to go off the board a little bit here. Florida Panthers. Let's go Sam Reinhart. That's going to do it for this edition of the DFO DFS Report. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, we have over 1,100 people watching the show live across all of our channels right now. If you're watching on YouTube, please smash that like button if you could. Comment your hat trick pick in the comment section below the video. Shout out to our friends at rotogrinders.com for providing us with projected ownership for tonight's slate. If you want to get $20 off your first month of Roto Grinders NHL Premium, you can do so by clicking the link in the description of the video on YouTube. Take everything you learned in today's show, put it in their optimizer, and build the optimal lineup at rotogrinders.com today. And if you want to join our DFS Discord, you can do so by clicking the link in the description of the video on YouTube. We are talking DFS in there all day long. I try to chip in on the weekends as well when we don't do the full charts. And then, even if you play NFL DFS, we've got an NFL DFS channel over there as well. Lots of things. We make sure that you don't miss any late changing news, some lineup news and warm-ups, any of that. We've got all of that for you. And Zach, you and I have been tossing around this idea. We're still trying to figure out the logistics of it. But if you want to, Zach and I are thinking of doing a watch party next Monday to sweat the DFS slate, just kind of get everybody together, watch some hockey, drink some drinks. It's the last game or last day before the Christmas break in the NHL. So just a little bit of fun. We're going to do that with the DFS Discord community. If anybody wants to come out, just kind of hang out, sweat the slate. We don't know exactly when or how it's all going to get put together. We're going to figure that out this week. But if you want to join the community, come have some drinks with the boys. We're going to do that as well. So thanks so much for tuning in. Best of luck tonight. Cheers. See you back here tomorrow.